So we are on page Nun Aleph. About 10 lines from the top, less than that. The line begins with the word atzmi. As much as we struggled to allow ourselves to focus on the concept of atzmi, something that is true in and of itself, and that whole Inyan, true in and of itself, does not have one aspect of worldliness. Worldliness is all created, and created has to have a beginning, has to have a cause. Or atzmi, this is the reality, truth itself, preceding all creation. This is what the Rambam says. There's a motzui rishain, mamchi kol nimtza, a first being. So we are discussing here the various levels, various types of his habus, of coming into being, creations. There's ha'ora me ha'ora. This is from his Chassidus. And then there is yesh me ayin, we discussed yesterday. Then there is his habus that comes from the oir atzmi, where the oir atzmi is not mislabish, cannot create anything other than itself. And so therefore, okay, let's start right inside. His habus from oir atzmi, ein hamizhavem hus acher me hamehave. Then hamizhave, that which comes into being, is not of a different presence than the mahava, than that which creates it. He has exactly the same qualities, basically, because it's an atzmi. It gives the mizhava, the created, an element of truth on par with itself. This is atzmi. So we discussed this in giving birth to a child and so forth. And Lamailo, this is Neshomis. V'yuvim bazeh bin Neshomis. So in this arena we will understand how it applies to Neshomis. The Mitziyusom, where the Mitzius of the Neshomis, Hu bechinas ho'er hapnimi v'ho'atzmi. Neshomis, their Mitzius, their presence, is bechinas, is this bechinas, this quality, this aspect of the oir pnimi v'atzmi. Meaning to say, I'll try to give it a little bit of an elaboration. In contrast to oir, to a created, to an active presence, the oir pnimi v'atzmi, the oir as it is internal to the source, and the atzmi the way it is in atzmi itself. It is not that the Etzim decided to create something. It is representing itself. And that's what Neshama says, are. And this is what the Alter Rebbe brings down right in the beginning of Tanya, the second page, because the Pasuk says, Vayipach be'apav nishmas chayim, that he blew into his nostrils a neshama of life. And then Zohar says that blowing is different than speaking. Speaking is an act, an external act that you have to create it at the point of speech. Blowing is something which comes from the internal force. And thus, to be mamshich, to draw, to bring down into the world. The oil is pnimi atzmi, the presence of atzmi, that there should be in the world an element that can be recognized as a godly presence. Hu alidei neshamas Yisrael davke, it is exclusively through neshamas Yisrael. That brings a true godly presence into the world. The Malachim, with the Malachim b'avidos and b'ahava v'yira shalohem, they are avedo of ahava yira shalohem, they are ahava v'yira, which is enormously a high madriga of ahava v'yira. They burn up in this ahava v'yira. Yet, mamshichim, they can draw and bring down and reveal rad bechinas yichud chitzoni dafka. They can only bring out the yichud chitzoni, the external union. A union between the creator and the created. Not an internal union that represents the essence to essence. Yichud chitzoni, in our terminology, would be fulfilling that which is lacking. So there's two things. It is providing something. Neshamas Yisrael, whereas Neshamas Yisrael al dei kiyum ateiros mitzvos, and is a result of kiyum ateiros mitzvos, fulfilling Torah mitzvos. Torah mitzvos are not to fill a gap. I've pointed out many times, Lo shignoiv is not a mitzvah to prevent any kind of fallout in the world, any kind of inadequacy. It's an essential godly command. The same goes for all Torah mitzvahs. Alvei kiyum Torah mitzvahs, by fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, mamshichim, they draw into the world bechinas yichud pnimi de'avo. The yichud pnimi, the internal yichud of Avo. Internal yichud Avo means the yichud on an essential level. Ukmeisha kosu, and as the Pasuk says, Tev havaya lekeivov. We all not familiar with this passage. Tev Hashem lekeivov. Hashem is good lekeivov to those who look after Him, anticipate Him. The Omer Hazal, and the Hazal say, Ksiv, and one passage says, Tev havaya lekeivov. That Abai is good to those who anticipate Him, to look up to Him. Uksiv, and the other passage says, Tev havaya lekeiv. That Hashem is good to all, not only the cable. And then it said, it says moshel. This is like a moshel. Okay, I have to admit I don't know this Chazal. That there is a difference between this goodness, the goodness lekevov, and the goodness of lekev, to all. Shemashke ukshe'elek. I have to look up the Gemara. V'yodua. It is known that these two goodness, Tev Havaya Lakevov and Tev Hashem Lakev, V'chon asher yikra'u v'emes, v'yodua shezeh koyi al habeis yichudim di'avo. That these two types of goodness, koyi is a reference to the two types of yichudim di'avo, two types of unions of avo. There is yichud chitzeni, the yichud chitzeni, where an yichud chitzeni hushanim shall be closed as ishtalshelus. This is what is drawn in ishtalshelus of the world in general. B'chol ha'olamos, in all worlds, v'hanivroyim, and all creatures. Vehu ma shezivugai hu todir. This is the union that that avo, just avo, the chochma bina zivugai hu todir. Their joining is a constant joint. Vezehu teva vaylakoy. This is pshat teva vaylakoy. It's good to all, because this is a chitzonistic thing, just to fulfill their need. Aval teva vaya. But the teva vaya that we said the first one, the koivo, the beginnes yichud pnimi de avo, the goodness of vaya that is expressed, a yichud pnimi de avo, not chitzoni, the yichud pnimi, the internal yichud of avo, hold the cave of dafka. That goodness is recognized and is bestowed only l'koivov, which is l'nefesh l'shomesh Yisrael, at the day Torah mitzvahs.
Who's the koivov again?
To his, those who look up to him, those who hope to him. L'shomesh Yisrael, at the day Torah mitzvahs. That is true only from l'shomesh Yisrael through Torah mitzvahs. V'hainu. And what is so special about Neshamas Yisrael and Torah mitzvahs? That is because that they are of this quality of atzmus ein soy, lochem bekoichom v'yicholtom. Thus, it is within their koyach and their ability, dafka, only in their koyach, lahamshir bechinas ha'ero atzmi, to bring and draw down this quality of ha'ero atzmi. It's an interesting thing. I'm going to put this a little bit in perspective. That all the way in the beginning, when we received the Torah, we said Nasev and Nishma. And this principle of Nasev and Nishma is a principle, a continuing principle in us, in our life, in our existence in the world, and our connection to Torah. Nasev Nishma, even after the Nishma, even after we already learn and understand, it remains in essence Nasev Nishma, Nasev prior to Nishma. And we always mention the principle of Kabbalah soil, of Beetle, Kabbalah soil, accepting the yoke, accepting the rulership. Why do we need to accept it if we understand it? The answer is that which you can draw, we can relate to through your understanding is not the real truth. That is only a relative truth. That's a truth that fits into some aspect of worldly existence. If we say that Torah mitzvah is wonderful, it makes life meaningful, that is not the essence. This is a worldly statement. The real relationship, the union from Oir in Soif, is essence to essence. And this is when Eden said Nasev and Nishma. I've explained it many times. Nasev and Nishma is the most profound insight, recognition possible. When you recognize that this real truth that we want, that we are relating to, is not something that can be understood, that we come through any kind of defined definition. Recognizing its presence, period. This is the Nasev and Nishma. And this is the Neshamas Yisrael are capable to Torah mitzvahs, to be mamshich oir atzmi. A fundamental reality. In the world, as we discuss all the time, everything has a why and has a sense of what it contributes. But what is the meaning of the existence in the first place? That does not have a worldly explanation at all. This is what's called oir atzmi, and didn't relate to that, to Torah mitzvahs. And that you can take only through Kabbalah Soil. There is no intellectual means to relate to it, intellectual or emotional. It is through the essence of the neshama. Yes. Hello. Okay. And the neshama Yisrael are capable of being mamshich, or drawing down and bringing into the world the oir atzmi. Now the Rebbe goes on and elaborates on it. Hine be'emes. Behold. Behold means focus in and try to understand what's going on over here. Be'emes, in absolute truth, lulei neshamas Yisrael v'toira. If not for neshamas Yisrael and Torah, lo yehoyu hamshochos oiris atzmim klal. There would not be hamshochos, drawings, revelations coming forth of oiris atzmim, of the etzem kind of oiris at all. To put this in perspective, as we always speak and say, that we have this this common illustration. You have the host and the guest, and the host has invited the guest to lunch. So lunch makes sense. There's something that connects them. This is what he's giving him. The guest appreciates the lunch, and the host has got something to give him. But then there is another element in this called total, where the lunch is completely by the way. There was a secondary, not even a secondary significance relative to this reality of the actual presence. So if not for the Neshamas Yisrael, there would be no Hamshachis Eiris Atzmim at all. Sha'arei ho'etzem, since that the etzem, who moved all be'erech min ha'oir ve'hagil, the etzem is categorically beyond oir and gilui of any kind of presence and representation. V'av gam ha'oir, and even the oir k'meishu hu b'bchinas gilui ha'etzem, even the oir that is at that, in that depth and purity of oir, as it is, has the quality of gilui ha'etzem. That this is an oil that consists not in presenting any kind of element, functionality, but gilui ha'etzem, the revelation of the etzem. Harehu be'emes, even that oil in truth, ein be'ein arech klal legabe ha'etzem. It's totally incomparable in a different category than the atzmi itself. This is, in our terminology, this is the principle of there is that person, there is the host, or there is this reality of a human being, and there is his presence. His presence does not capture what he is in essence. The essence remains in a category by itself.
Even though we've had that, without his presence there'd be no.
His presence represents the Oyer atzmi.
Right.
But the Oyer atzmi is only Oyer, that's not the atzmi. Ha'oyer b'chinas ha'ora levad. The oyer is only a ha'ora. What is it a ha'ora of? It's a ha'ora of the yatzim. It's a statement that there is such thing as an etzim, but it itself is not an etzim. It's a representation of the etzim. She'ein b'min ha'etzim, that does not contain any of the etzim. Varehu b'chinas ayin mamosh. And therefore this oil is something that if you want to define the oil, you would call it ayin, truly non-presence. Rotzol leimer. What do you mean by the word ayin in this case? B'chinas heder dover u'mitzius ma. It is in the quality of heder dover, of absence of a thing, of a real presence. Or mitzius ma, of any kind of a mitzius. She'ein me'acha she'ein atzmi. This oil is an oil of the yatzim. The oil is not an atzmi in itself. It doesn't create itself. It's created by the yatzim. And in itself is heder mitzius. Is a non-entity. Because it is ayin, because it is a non-entity, this is why it can represent the etzem. It becomes completely transparent, so to speak, to the etzem, the oil.
Or this presence, like the presence of the host.
Like the presence of the host. It's transparent to the mitzius of the host. But it's only transparent, it's not the host himself. It reveals the host.
Okay.
Therefore it is ayin mamash.
And in this world, the most the person sees is or atzmi.
The most you can see is the ayin
And it's hardly a creation. We're kind of saying it's not sort of separate entity.
It's not. It's transparent. Like we say, there's a melech. So what happens if there is a melech?
Yeah, but this that is transparent sort of implies you can see through it to the etzem. But then we said ein aroch. You cannot really.
You don't really have anything there.
On the one hand, it's
but you can relate to it by Kabbalah Sifra, by dedication.
Okay. So this presence is null and it's transparent. So that would seemingly imply you could look straight to essence, but no. We say ein aroch. Essence is not.
Why am I doing anything? Because there is a melech someplace in the palace.
Wait, in this mashal, This is a case where what's happening here? You're living in a country and you never see the king. That's the point here?
Live in a country, you never see the king. My example always was a soldier on the front lines, and he has to constantly face the death, the precariousness of his own life, and yet he has the full strength to hold the fort. On what basis? There's a reality beyond the tangible.
Right, and in that case, he doesn't even have the presence. The king is somewhere else. He doesn't have a representation at all.
He has the oil. The oil is a haor. And Ayin mamash. Heder Mtzias, atzmi. It comes from the atzmi. V'im kein and das legabe ho'etzem, relative to the etzem, hu bechinas ho'atzmi, the etzem, which is the atzmi. V'yesh ho'amiti, and the true presence. Harei ho'oir hu bechinas ayin be'etzem. There the oil is Ayin be'etzem, is in essence Ayin, which meaning just transparency, as we said. Ve'einei be'erech klal u'klal. It's totally not in that category. It's not in category at all of the etzem. The al came. Well, I think it's after the second call. Okay. So this is where we're up to. What?
Any announcements?
Okay, have a great day. We're going down now.
There is a sponsor. There's an anonymous sponsor, I think, for Berlin. And there's a sikha tonight, and I think Baruch is going to teach. Anybody?
Shabbos morning, we haven't heard from
I assume so. I don't know of any reason why not. School is getting on to it.